Hey everyone, Pastor Zach here. Thanks so much for being interested in our book, The World is About to Turn. I'm really excited for us to have some great conversation on it, and I appreciate you spending this time and being able to engage in some conversation with one another as we go through it. I want to point out some things in the book and throughout our discussion time. And what I would encourage you to do is you can record questions or comments and you can post them to this feed through Facebook or YouTube. You can also direct message me questions that you have, and I can go to answer them and further along the discussion. So this is just going to be a basic introduction to what we're going to do, how we're going to talk about it, and moving forward through all of that through our time together. And I look forward to sharing in all of this with all of you and to hearing your take on the book and on your reactions to it. My hope is, and I do believe it is still in the works, that we will meet with the author Rick Rouse in October. He is supposed to be here, so look out for some more information on that. I'm going to make sure that's still true to date. As we go through this, what I would like to do is just show you a couple of things. Here's where my progression is thinking that we'll go. Today we'll talk about our introduction in chapter 1. Next week we'll talk about chapters 2 and 3, and then chapter 4, chapters 5 and 6, and then chapter 7 and the latter, and then the discussion with the author, hopefully after worship. So there's a lot of great things to talk about in this book, and I think a lot of really challenging things. And that's something that I want to uplift to, is that if you struggle with this content, I think that's good too. It's important for us to have some of those conversations and to be able to disagree faithfully in that. So I invite you to do some of that if there's something in here that strikes you that you don't really get or understand or completely agree with. So thanks so much for taking the time with me as we do this. So the introduction, and here it says chapters 1 and 2, but introduction in chapter 1 talks about the history and how we as America got here. They say the gospel is a wonderful and astonishing message of love and compassion for God who created all of us and would never ever want someone to be cast out and separated from the community. That's really important for us to remember. And I think so often what we hear through media and through various things is groups that are very much into what I've deemed as against-ism in faith, where we know what a group is against, but do we really know what it's for? So do we join a group because of what they're against, or do we work to understand what a group is for and to really join that? As I said, there's some really amazing stuff in here about the gospel and their promise and in their introduction. So if you skipped over their introduction, I invite you to pause this, to go back and read it. It's just a couple of pages, and then to come back and join us. Because I think it's important, as they say, we seek to offer biblical and interreligious approaches to the question, how does God intend us to live well together in common life? And I think that's a really important question for us to hold on to and to struggle with, because that was God's intention. In my opinion, that was God's intention, to live together in common life. And sometimes that is a challenge for us, and God doesn't say that it won't be a challenge for us. But the question becomes, how do we as communities of faith seek to be, as they put it, intend to be agents of transformation and hope for our world today and for the world around us? But also, how do we live well together in common life? We struggle with that in many ways, I feel, especially here in America, in our world today. So how can we use this opportunity to start having some conversations, and maybe some challenging conversations, for us to live into and to move forward? And so, again, I encourage you to pause it, think about that, write some notes down, or type something into the chat function or the comment section, and then continue on after you post that, so we can have some of these discussions. I know people will be talking and and participating in this over time over the course of a week. So I invite you, if you have time to watch this in segments, to go back to it and to find ways to interact and to comment on some of these things. The first question in chapter 1, what is the question of the failure of the American religious experiment, and talking about how in Rent, the author, the creator of it, asked the question, how do you measure a year? Do you measure it in love? And it's a really great story and a really great way to think about how we may actually understand America and understand our faith in all of that. And again, here's another opportunity. Pause it and just think about that. Do you believe this, what they coin the American religious experiment, has failed? And I think it's a really poignant question as we look at where we are and where we came from. And so again, pause it, think about it, write some notes down or write a comment, and then I encourage you to continue forward. Because we're going to talk about the dark side of religion. And we have these two, what I call, competing ideas. We have the doctrine of discovery, the colonization, and the who counts, slavery and the racism behind it, manifest destiny, the right to expand beyond. And those are really important concepts because, who counted for colonization? In fact, any person of color during that time was considered, and I should have looked it up because I had this question yesterday when we met in person, that it was either 2/3 or 3/5 of a person. So people of African descent, the indigenous people in the US, didn't count as full human beings. And that was part of the slavery as well. They weren't seen as human. The titles that they were given were to help not personify them, so that it would be seen more as property than it would be as true human beings, because they wouldn't do this to human beings. And we saw that through indentured servitude and things like that. And then this notion of manifest destiny. Did God give us this land? And if so, then the feeling is that we're allowed to destroy anyone who claims that they have ownership of it and take it by force. And there is precedence in some ways for the Old Testament that the Israelites did that. They went into various places where God said, slaughter them. And so what does that mean for us to look at our history just 200 years ago, 250, a little over, and see that as the way America was built, with sort of juxtaposed on the other side, the Great Awakening, that the idea that all people should be able to practice their given beliefs in any way they wish without fear of persecution. So we have this idea, this ideal that, in the foundation of the country, we were seen as a way to do just that. There was this freedom of religion. In fact, our Constitution says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So even in that, there is this notion of people should be able to be free in their beliefs and in their understandings, yet did that fully relate to what was going on in the world at the time? There were some problems or interesting things about that notion of freedom. There's no accountability to a higher authority, such as a national church or a global church body. Problem is that anybody can speak for God. They can speak. If you know someone who can figure out how to fulfill a 501c3, and get people to follow you, you can start a church. And how is that? Is that good? Is that bad? What does that then look like? Or Christianity then became the de facto requirement for being American. This is the land of free religion, except. And I think those are some questions that the authors touch on in their book. And I think they do it pretty well. So I encourage you to wrestle with some of that and to hear what they have to say and to disagree if you do so. And that how then do we answer some of those questions or some of those challenges? And with all of that, what does that mean for them and for us looking forward? I realize that when I put this together, this next slide sort of jumps a little bit. But it doesn't and it doesn't. So, we have this question of young people. All sorts of churches want to know, well, how do we get young people and what's the big deal? And so this was a poll that was done, and here are some of the answers. Why are young people not attending churches? And they say religious people are hypocritical, judgmental, and insincere. Religions are partly true, but none is completely true. Religious organizations are too focused on rules, not on spirituality. Religious leaders only want money and power. Religious people are anti-science. Do you believe that's true? Do you believe that's what they believe? And that's the thing. You may not believe that for our faith, for your faith, but can you see where some people may see that, especially when the news portrays that, or the news portrays specific groups who speak in this way. So why might they say this? And question becomes, how then can we perhaps open dialogue to listen to them and to offer opportunities for them to see that is not always the case. But really, when it comes down to that and everything, I think in the beginning chapter, we need to find common ground. So how do we find common ground so that we can move forward together into a more just and hopeful future? And I think that for me, and hopefully for you as we go through some of this book, is where my hope is where I hope that we can go, and finding ways to move forward in some of this, ways that we can connect and start to find common ground, even if it's that common ground is having some of these challenging discussions. And again, here's another opportunity for you to pause, make some notes, make some comments, and then continue forward. Our freedoms, it's interesting that I don't think we can go beyond our common good or common ground without talking about freedom. We talked about freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Most of all, these freedoms were intended for the common good in America and to promote the welfare of all people. It was to find ways to work together. But in our individualistic culture of today, that spirit has been lost on those who revel in the partisan divide, claiming their cause is righteous while demonizing those who disagree with them. And I think that can be seen. And some would say, well, yeah, that's my side, and the other side's, the ones who, if they would just get their act together, whatever. But I think we need to recognize that the groups that do this, and how then can we seek to offer opportunities to listen and to find ways, if possible, to find common ground for the common good. And I think that's really vital for us to remember, is that if we are called to be in community with one another, the important thing is just that, community, common good. They all come from the same thing. So there are a bunch of questions at the end of this first chapter. I pulled out 3 that I thought would be really interesting for us to discuss. How has religion been used as a weapon to intimidate or manipulate people? How do you specifically, think myths like the doctrine of discovery or manifest destiny have contributed to the notion that America is God's chosen nation? And what is the manifesto reclaiming Jesus a hopeful sign? Are there others? Those are some questions that I was struck by out of the 5 that I thought might be really interesting for us to delve deeper into. I'll put up another one of these sort of going in my discussion of what I think they are later in the week, but I'm curious to hear what yours are. So I will hop in again towards mid to late week and to talk about that. So I wanted to share all of that with you, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say and to share in some of this. And so I invite you to please comment, make statements, interact with one another, upload videos, other content that you may have to have us have common ground and have some faithful discussion. And I would appreciate all of us being respectful of one another as we move forward with some of these challenging topics. Thank you guys so much for this opportunity to be in conversation with you about this book. I'm really excited as we go through it. Excuse me. And I can't wait for us to have some more discussion. Take care, everybody. We'll talk again soon.